All right, thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz, Monday through Friday, 12 noon, live on YouTube and subscribing platforms. Welcome to the program. Gary Goldman's with us from WCRN. Gary's a host there. He's a financial advisor. Gary, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Charles.
And congratulations on your daughter's wedding, too.
Thank you. Thank you
It's a
very
great day.
much.
Look, we're less than a week in terms of hours before what I would argue is the most consequential election in our lifetime. I mean, it seems to me, and President Trump has said that, and I think he's right about that. The contrast couldn't be more stark. And I'm optimistic, but I'm nervous. I don't think my where I stand is any secret. What is your take of things, and where do you think it's going? What do you think is going to go down?
Well, I think it is good versus evil. That to me, that's what this election is all about.
Yeah.
You couldn't have made it any clearer. So I agree with you. But I'm optimistic. Look at if you study the polls in 2016 and study the study what's going on now with all these pundits, very similar, very similar. I think there's a lot of people out there that are afraid to say they're going with President Trump. And how can you blame them, Charles, with the violence, the
Oh,
threats
yeah,
of violence,
terrible.
letters, we're going to burn down your home, etc. But I look at, I'm feeling very confident that President Trump is going to win re-election, and I still feel he's going to win this election with a large margin. I really do believe. I think there are a lot of people out there that are just holding back. Look at if Joe Biden happens to pull this off,
Mhm.
it's going to take a whole new take on the way elections are run in this country. You stay in your basement for X number of weeks, especially the 10 days before the election. You're really not out pounding the pavement. And if somehow he was able to pull this off, it will change the way we hold elections going forward. But it also would make you wonder what is really going on in this country. Most people say things are better now economically than they were 4 or 5 years ago. Look at COVID, no surprise with the problems with COVID. All in all, I think the president's done a good job. And here's a guy that had COVID less than 2, 3 weeks ago that's out on the campaign trail every single day. Look at, he's not a young guy. President Trump's in his 70s, in good health. Just goes to show COVID's serious. We should take it serious, but you can get through it and your life will go on as well.
When I take a look at sort of I guess you might call it the establishment media, the Washington Post, the New York
Yeah.
Times, the Drudge Report, especially, which is the worst. Your heart sinks. I mean, they're today in the Drudge Report, they're quoting from a poll that was conducted by The Economist, which isn't an American newspaper, it's English, which says that Biden has a 94% chance of winning, according to their statistics. And when I look at that, in my mind, I say that's crap. But you can't help but just be concerned.
You definitely have to be concerned because that's all we're hearing. But is that not part of it? One of the better psychological propaganda campaigns that we've seen in a long time. And if this is what they're going to do to
Mhm.
polls, Charles, going forward, if President Trump truly wins this, and whether he just pulls it out or he wins it substantially, I think it's going to make people really question polling going forward. And I think it's going to have that industry is going to have some questions to answer as well.
I do notice that the Drudge Report has stopped with these daily polls from from American pollsters saying that Biden's ahead like 14, 15%. They're not saying that now. And that tells me that it's tightening. There has been talk of people, the Democrats put a lot of effort into getting out a very early vote. The earlier, the better. And the early vote has Biden ahead, but not as much as they should have be. I mean, it's I think that it's 2-1, but it could be bigger. And now there are people who are experiencing remorse for having voted for Biden because of all the revelations about the corruption with his relatives, getting on payrolls and the graft and the bribery and the kickbacks and all of that. And yet it's too late. They already voted for Biden. Now, I don't know if you know about this, Gary, but I heard a fellow talk show host say that that can be remedied by showing up at the polls on election day, telling the clerk that you had voted earlier and that you want to cancel that vote, and then you can vote. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard the same thing. I've been trying to do a little research on it today. It almost looks like that's a state by state thing, Charles. I mean,
Sure.
it doesn't look like it's uniform, but there are states where I think that is possible. Look, that's the problem with the early voting and the very rapid early voting. That's the problem when the press doesn't tell us, mainstream media, what is really going on, telling the American people the facts. And I think that's what this Biden campaign has been hoping for. With that
Right.
said, though,
Mhm.
with that said, you look at you really have to wonder what is intriguing them about Vice President Biden. He, I mean, most people understand his position. He's definitely going left, very far left, from my opinion.
Mhm.
His running mate, there's no surprise with how progressive she is and how far to the left she is. And everything with her wants to be based on her life experience instead of studying issues and working with people to figure out things going on. So I really wonder if this is the case. If what we're hearing turns out to be the truth, then I mean, I've got to wonder what is going through the minds of a lot of American people. Not that they're not entitled to their own vote, but here's a guy that's really said nothing, hasn't campaigned or done anything in 40 something years being in public office. President Donald Trump's been in there, was his fourth year, and he hasn't stopped working, and he's
Right.
achieved
Incredible.
so much more. So I look at, if it's a personal thing and you don't like the way he comes across, that's one thing, but you have to look at the big picture. You have to look at the policy and what's good for the country.
Well, I think you touched on it in that nobody's enthusiastic about Biden. Nobody really wants him. He's kind of ignored, and and the running mate is worse. And I think you're putting it politely. The fact is that it's a classic example of tokenism. We have to find a black woman, and that'll get the black vote and the woman vote, which is so cynical because it's actually at its core a very racist approach. Like women and blacks or sexist, they're going to vote for someone because it's a woman, like, or black. Like, what have they done for them? And I think that it hasn't worked. She hasn't resonated. She's not well liked, and she's very bizarre the way she comes across with the giggling and the laughing constantly at serious questions. I just don't think people see her as presidential, and I think that's backfired. The other thing I wonder if it's backfired, and I don't know, maybe you might want to comment on this, is the confirmation of Amy Comey Barrett, who I think is helpful. Now, the left is going berserk over this. I'm seeing some of the tweets. I mean, people's heads are exploding, but probably because it is a great accomplishment. What do you think that's going to play any factor in the race? And if so, what do you think it is?
No, I think the Democrats were trying to play that in a manner that, made it look like the Republicans, quote unquote, were cheating by pushing this through. Look, there's nothing that says you can't nominate and put somebody in that off as
Of
a
course.
Supreme Court judge. So that's all ridiculous. I don't think it's going to backfire on the Republicans at all. I think the Democrats are crying. If they were in the same position, Charles, they would have done the same thing. There's no doubt about it. And their
Well,
heads are exploding. Their heads are
yeah.
exploding because they got beat at their own game, is what this amounts to. And in regard to Kamala Harris, when you look at what she constantly has to say, I'm not surprised that she's not resonating. She didn't resonate in the Democratic primary. She never made it
No.
to a vote. So, what she's doing in that seat, I think you sort of laid it out properly. There are a lot of other very, very good candidates that I think Joe Biden could have come up with that would have given him a little bit a
Mm.
better shot at beating President Trump.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I responded to one of Elizabeth Warren's tweets, and I got people getting back to me when she referred to the Barrett confirmation as illegitimate. And I'm like, what are you implying? Are you implying that the Republicans killed, Ruth Bader Ginsburg? I mean, there's nothing illegitimate about it. You may not like it, but when there's a vacancy in the judiciary, the president has the option to appoint a successor. That's how the Constitution works. I mean, this idea that they're like, it's not constitutional. I mean,
But that's
it's
what they
crazy.
do. That's their narrative all the time. It's like little kids that don't get their own way. They start kicking their feet and throwing a temper tantrum and creating these narratives that are just not true. Elizabeth Warren would do everybody a favor if she just sat back and was, stayed out of the
Well,
way. But not one of my favorites, as you
no,
probably know by that comment.
it would have been interesting if Biden had picked her,
Oh, it would
but
have been very interesting.
so we're moving toward the big day. I think that there is I have never seen in my lifetime, and I'm old enough to have seen a lot, the kind of movement and enthusiasm that President Trump is generating. You have apparently, according to the Rasmussen poll, 47% of blacks now are voting for Trump. You've got rallies in Florida by Hispanics. You got a Jewish rally in Brooklyn, Jews for Trump. He's getting to his natural constituency, minorities, and I think he's even possibly maybe making a little dent on the millennials. Although I don't know if I have a lot of hope for them. What say you?
Yeah, no, I agree. Look at blacks, Hispanic. I think that's what's going to give President Trump the big push and the numbers that he needs, and rightfully so. In 4 years, look what he's done. Again, jobs. When you make someone's life a lot easier by giving them jobs, better wages, and competitive environment, and never mind some of the reforms he has come across, criminal reforms and things, charter schools, whatever the case may be. He's doing things to make people's lives better. And that's what they're looking at. A lot of people looking at this. For years, the Democrats have promised, filled their pockets and their associates' pockets with money while they handed out checks to people in return for votes. Well, after a while, when you have a guy like Trump who comes in there and shows the American people that I'm going to do what I say and I'm going to help you create a better life, I think we're seeing it. We're going to see it in the ballot box.
Well, I mean, I think personally, who knows? Maybe from my lips to God's ear, I think that Trump is going to do better in every state, including even California. I think he's going to close the gap. I think he may even pick off a few states that he didn't have last time, like Minnesota, states that have had some of these thugs, looting black businesses,
Yeah,
burning
yeah.
black neighborhoods, with the left doing nothing about it. Even, I think he's solidifying in Michigan. There are some worries in the South, but Florida, apparently he's outside the margin of error now in terms of being ahead. And I mean, even at New Hampshire, oh, that would be great.
Yeah, well, that would be the best of them all. And I
Yeah,
think you're right. He's going to outperform. And look, at time will tell. A week from today, we will know. Well, we'll hopefully start to know, depending on what happens with the mail-ins and states prolonging this process. But I think the president's going to be okay. Look, at if we
oh,
need to
it's a
continue the movement forward. We need to continue the
yeah.
movement forward. And look, at one of the biggest things that really aggravates me is this violence, and if and the looting, the rioting, and the lack of response on the part of the Democrats. In other words, I think they've quieted it down a little bit after CNN and MSNBC told them this isn't hurting
Mm.
your election probability, your chances here. But at the same time, Charles, that was a wink of the eye, and at any point they can erupt again. And they don't seem to have any problems with it, especially when former President Barack Obama was on his, he's been out stumping for the
Yeah.
vice president, former vice president Biden, and he's okay with this. They don't, they act like these are peaceful protests. I'm all for peaceful protests. This is beyond peaceful protests. And what's happening in Portland now in the suburbs of that community
Hmm.
is scary, and it should have everyone in this country open their eyes and take notice.
And maybe they'll even turn Oregon. I don't know. I mean, and Obama has really lost his mojo. Not that he ever had any,
Yeah,
but
no,
he's.
no, he's, they're with his lack of response at these rallies where he has so many few people, they're saying it's because of COVID that they don't want the response. Knowing Barack Obama's ego, he wants as many people there as he possibly could
Oh,
have.
it's terribly embarrassing. Nobody goes. They get like 25 people showing up. I mean, Harris even had to go outside a polling place, which is illegal, to try to find people to talk to. It was just.
And then when they do have them, they're being shouted down by Trump supporters relatively close by, which
Oh
makes
my
it even
God.
more aggravating. But yeah, I mean, look at well, either way, I think we have difficult time. We've got to get through this COVID. I think so we're going to have some economic repercussions yet
There
from
is.
it. I don't think we've seen it bottom out. And I think we really have to be concerned of what will happen when the president wins, being optimistic here, as far as violence on the streets of America, because I think that is in the back of a lot of people's minds.
Right. And also, I mean, if you're concerned about the economy and the $1 trillion in debt, I mean, I would think that one would support Trump because you don't want to have a president come in and raise taxes and eliminate tax cuts, by which effectively is raising taxes.
Right.
and other measures like that, and not during a downturn. I mean, it's hard enough trying to get back on your feet in these times. Um, and what do you think, Gary? How do you think Trump is going to do in Massachusetts?
I think look at, I'm not, I would love him to see him just take the state, but I reach out to a lot of the conservative groups every week before my show, and I find out where their rallies and their things are that are going on. There's a lot of momentum in this state for President Trump. But again, Charles, we're not going to see it on our local news channels. They don't want to
Right.
support that at all. But I think he's going to do fairly well in this state. I really do. I'm not sure what the numbers will
I
be,
do
but
too.
I think he's going to do okay.
Even Trump did well last time. I mean, people don't talk about this, but he got, I think, just shy of 1 million votes. It wasn't a blowout for Hillary Clinton in Massachusetts last time around. I mean, I think he did better in Massachusetts than he did in New York. And, so you never know. I mean, people are very shy about mentioning that they're supporting Trump for reasons we mentioned. Even in their own families, you're shy about it. I mean, right? I mean, I can speak to that. I mean, the amount, I mean, the entire opposition to Trump is this irrational hatred that's been stoked by a media that pounds away every single day. I mean, they do front page stories about the fact that he got an extra scoop of ice cream at a state dinner. It's bizarre. And I don't think it's working. I think if it does work, that's troubling. But meanwhile, the I think the final nail was this suppression of the Biden scandal by
Yeah.
the mainstream media. I mean, NPR actually went out with an open and brazen statement saying, we are not going to cover that story. And this is a big story. Now especially you have the business partner of Hunter Biden coming out in a speech and saying, laying out how Joe Biden was involved in negotiating with China. There's questions about China maybe even having exposed some people who were in the CIA. I mean, this is a real. If this was Trump, if this was any other politician, it would be front and center. Main story, but yet they are completely suppressing it. If you go and watch Lester Holt or any of these guys, there's not a single mention of this. And I think the American people know that. And that to me is the most troubling. Has never been this kind of censorship. I don't think in American history have we seen that.
No, and I had John O'Connor on Saturday. He was one of the Watergate attorneys.
Yeah.
And I asked him, how does this parallel with Watergate? He said, Watergate is a pimple in an ocean basically compared to what has gone on here and what the American people are eventually will find out. But you are right, Charles. The lack of enthusiasm on the part of the American people when you have a career politician who is stealing, him and his family stealing money,
Yeah.
and who knows how much jeopardy they're putting this country in, and what they're selling at any point in time. And I talk to people that I consider knowledgeable that A, either don't want to talk about it, or B, don't even know anything about it. And that to
Well,
me
that's
is
it.
concerning. And like, where is your mind? This is very important. But you know what? When you look at what happened with the coup, the attempted coup, the Russian collusion, and nothing happening in that, no accountability yet, maybe there will be. I think the American people get a little complacent saying, well, it's almost like to some people, part of American politics. This is beyond part of American politics. This is dangerous, unacceptable, but dangerous behavior.
It just worries me because, Gary, you and I are political junkies. I mean, we are
Yeah.
always watching the news, right? But most people still get their news from Lester Holt, and Nora O'Donnell. I mean, and they don't hear this because it's been censored. There's been a complete blackout of this information. And I think there are people out there who have no idea. And that is really, it's almost like Orwellian. It's the kind of stuff that would happen absolutely in an authoritarian country, the fact that they get away with that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I wonder, when you think about the media, the long term looking forward, will they ever be able to correct themselves and get back to any type of normal, fair reporting? And the more this goes on, Charles, the less I feel confident that that's going to happen. I think we've set way too many precedents by allowing them to do what they've done. No accountability. They just keep doing it. If they make a mistake, they sort of try and retract the next day,
Oh,
or
yeah.
they just keep going with the lies. So it's hard to assume that they're going to get better over time.
No, it's constant. I mean, just a recent example. I mean, it's almost every day they go out with a complete lie. I mean, the big story was that Trump had been endorsed by the Taliban. Turned out to be completely false. The next day they retracted it, but they had a full day of Trump bashing, and the damage was done. That's how this is a political hit. I mean, it would be like if I called the Boston Globe and said, that Trump raped my mother, and then they put it on the front page. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that bad. They're just it's completely irresponsible. I think that if Trump does well, and I think if he increases his margins and picks off a few more states, and I think that if the Republicans hold on to the Senate, which I think they will, and maybe even close in a little bit on the House, I don't know if they'll take the House, but they certainly could tighten it. Then this is going to be like McGovern.
Yeah.
Because, right, I mean, the Democratic Party is going to realize that it had been completely captured by a left-wing group, and that they're going to purge that group, and it'll take them another generation before they come up with a reasonable candidate, and even then it'll be someone who's more conservative, like a Bill Clinton.
Right. And that group they're not going to go without fighting, screaming, and kicking, that left progressive
Yeah, oh
group.
yeah, sure.
They're going to continue the fight because they have an agenda that they really believe is going to come to fruition. So if Joe Biden loses, there's going to be a lot of interesting things happening in the Democratic Party. And we'll have to see what happens with Speaker Pelosi. If they win the House again, will she be the Speaker?
Right. And meanwhile, they're preparing lawsuits. They're trying to extend voting dates, and guess what? It's going to come over before the Supreme Court. And guess who's on the Supreme Court now? So I don't know if that's going to work for them. That's probably why they're having a meltdown. Anyway.
Well, I think that was a big part of it because they were hoping, if we saw what happens when there's a tie, it falls back to the lower court. And that's what they were hoping, something would fall back to a court like in Pennsylvania or wherever, maybe and work in their favor. But they know what the outcome will be, especially someone as a legal mind like Justice Barrett here. She's incredible, and she's going to play by the rules, and that's the way by the Constitution, and that's what we need.
That's right. She's doing what a judge is supposed to do. They're supposed to review the law, review cases, and look at whether or not they're constitutional, and then decide whether it goes forward. That's their job, and that's what she's going to do. So, Gary, when is your show on? When can people find out? How can people find out more about what you're doing?
So the show is on Saturdays from 9 to 11 on WCRN, which is 8:30 a.m. Mm-hmm. This week, we start our syndication on 1200 a.m. in Boston.
Oh, excellent.
So that's where you'll find us. You can go to my website, GaryOnBPL.com. That's GaryOnBPL.com, and all the information's there. And Charles, I look forward to having you on in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Gary. Listen, have a great time. Congratulations. And talk to you soon.
Thank you. Have a wonderful